And what's happening in 1967 and 68? Most of the writers who write books on these mention Israel gets Jerusalem back. And that is an outcome. But what was actually happening is an Arab war. Arab-Israeli war. The second time in that century we see this tetrad, which is what this is called when you have 4 back-to-back moons like this, happen on Jewish feasts, and they again have Arab-Israeli war. In this war, there we go. Israel tripled its property size. Israel began expanding out. Now, Israel was only 19 years old. Israel had only been a nation again for 19 years. And they, in 1 hour, took out the Egyptian army, Egyptian Air Force, took out their Air Force, and took the Sinai Peninsula, and began moving out north and east. As these enemies attacked them, they attacked back, and they showed themselves to be a mighty army. Only 19 years old. They took property back, and they tripled their size. They took East Jerusalem, and they took the Sinai Peninsula, which, as I mentioned earlier, they did give back. So what I see happening when these blood moons occur is the people of God get attacked. That is the connecting factor. Now, there is something that seems to come out of those as well. In 1948, Israel became a nation. In 1967, they got Jerusalem. But what is the connecting factor is that they get attacked by their neighbors, their Arab neighbor nations. Now, why I'm talking about this tonight is not just because it's supposed to happen next month on April 15th, this first of the lunar eclipse. But the significant thing is when these things seem to happen on Jewish feasts, Israel gets attacked by its neighbors. And this is exactly what is predicted in Psalms 83. Why were they attacked in 1949? Because their neighbors wanted the land. Why were they attacked in 1967? Because their neighbors wanted the land. They wanted to drive them out. So here we are in 2014, 2015. And we're about to have these same blood moons, a tetrad event happen on the Jewish festival, Jewish feast day. What do you expect will happen? Because God works in patterns. God works. See, the Western mind thinking of prophecy is prediction, fulfillment. But the Jewish prophecy, the Jewish mind of prophecy, is pattern. God does things in patterns. God lays out things in shadows. Just as you can look at the Passover and the Jews being led out of captivity by Moses is a picture of Christ. You look at Ruth and Boaz as a picture of Christ, salvation, redemption. We see a pattern here. And so I am going to predict, I'm going to put my neck on the line, because there are two things that I think are going to happen. One will be an effect. Each time something like this has happened, there has been an effect. I think the effect may be retaking of the Temple Mount, building of the temple. That's not my prediction. It's just a thought. My prediction is Arab-Israeli war.
Yeah.
Because it's a pattern. See, there was a shift in 1948, and God has begun moving back to dealing with Israel. I believe the age of the church is at an end, and we're going to see the rapture sooner than we think. Anytime now. I'm I'm ready. But we see patterns beginning to happen. And when patterns begin to happen, it's not really a message to the church, but it's a message to the Jews. When the rabbis began studying this out, I guarantee that there are rabbis over in Israel today that have Psalms 83 open. And they know this is coming. The reason I know that is because their prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, he's a scholar of the Bible. In fact, he said 2 years ago, he was standing at one of the fields of the Holocaust in one of the prison camps, and he said, this day, this prophecy is fulfilled. Speaking of Ezekiel 37, the valley of dry bones coming back to life. He recognizes the fulfillment of prophecy. He knows that Ezekiel 38 is coming. We'll look at that one later. I guarantee he also knows that those neighboring nations that have missiles pointed at him, that desire the land and want to throw them off the land, that there is going to be an attack. I guarantee that he has people that are looking at this deeper than I have. Why is this important for us? We need to recognize today that prophecy is being actively fulfilled. This was written 3,000 years ago, and we're watching it come into fulfillment today. Before your eyes, what God has said will happen is happening. Now, some point between today and the next couple of years, we're going to see a list of nations attack Israel. And I would not be a bit surprised that these are not the nations we see involved in that skirmish. Because it is what God has said will happen, and they're doing exactly what God said they would do. Now, personal application. When you see God's prophecies being fulfilled, it's a message to you that God is faithful to His word. If He's faithful to His promises to Israel, He's going to be faithful to you. If He said He was going to give you peace, He's going to give you peace. If He said He's going to save your soul, He's going to save your soul. There's assurance that comes to you when you look at fulfilled prophecy. Everything that was said in Scripture about Jesus is coming. Remember we went through Psalms and we looked at all those predictions in Jesus that were fulfilled? That gives us the assurance that God is faithful to do what He said He would do. And that's, for me, that's the point of prophecy. That it points us to the faithfulness of God, one. Two, it points us to the plan of God. We need to refocus our lives and realize that what's happening in this world is not about me. This isn't about your life or your happiness, but it's about God's plan and the fulfillment of His goals and His agendas. That's why I can say with confidence there's going to be a temple built in Israel, even though there's a great deal of conflict over that idea. Several there would have a conniption, have a literal freak-out attack if Jews begin setting up boulders on the Temple Mount. But I know that the Antichrist is going to go into a temple in Jerusalem and defile it during the tribulation, that future event that's coming. So in order for that to happen, there has to be a temple built. Whether it's today or if it's during the tribulation, I know it's going to be built. These are things that we can say with confidence. Is it likely that Israel will take more land and build its temple in the course of an event attack? Very likely. That is the pattern that has happened. They have been successful. So, now Russia is very, very interesting. I've mentioned this before. We're going to spend a little more time on them when we look at the prophecy in Ezekiel 38. But they're an extraordinary nation that's doing exactly what God said they would be doing. God said that they would be a guard for these Middle East nations. They would prepare themselves and prepare these nations. We see that in Ezekiel 38. And it's exactly what has happened. Russia has rebuilt its empire, is rebuilding it today because of its selling of arms, selling of munitions and bombs. You know, isn't it funny that America allowed Russia to be in charge of de-arming the chemical weapons of Syria? Because Russia is selling them missiles and jets and tanks and weapons. Just as the Bible predicted that they would. When we look at, I don't know if you do, maybe some of you don't even look at the news today, but if you look at the international news, you're going to see these nations doing exactly what God said they would do. Our president and our Secretary of State is working very hard to force a peace between the Palestinians, as they call them, and Israel. At the sake of giving them land. They're trying to pressure. But yet, the leader of the Palestinians, he says there will be no peace without Jerusalem as our capital. There will be no peace process without, they want to push Israel back to the 67 border, the land border they had back in 1967, which gives away Jerusalem, which gives away this high ground, which would allow them to put their missiles on the high ground to rain down on the cities of Israel.
Think that will happen?
No. I think we're in trouble for trying to make them give away land, because God said it's a curse to anybody who tries to divide his land. That is the desire of these, to take the land from Israel, but I don't believe it's going to happen.
Is Iran going to have a part of this?
Iran is not going to have a part in the Psalms 83 war. There's going to be a skirmish among the neighbors of Israel. Israel's going to be triumphant. And then you can look at Ezekiel 38, which has Russia and Iran involved in an attack on Israel. At that point, Israel is at peace. Israel is like America after we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We were the big dog and nobody messed with us. Our borders were open. We were the cowboy that was relaxed because everybody was afraid of America. Don't mess with the big cowboy, he'll drop a bomb on you. But I think Israel will be in kind of that state after this skirmish. And that's when Russia and Iran will form a federation of nations that's mentioned there in Ezekiel 38, which we'll talk about soon. That's when we see Russia and Iran. I believe that Russia and Iran are playing their hand using Syria and these nations as puppets. They've armed them, they've pointed them at Israel, and they're going to let the leash off when something sparks a regional conflict, which I believe is going to happen around this time frame. Could be towards the end of it, could be closer to 16. But guaranteed the pattern that's happening is going to continue. Why do I say that confidently? Because Jesus said, in the last days, there will be wars and rumors of wars. We got lots of rumors, and we got lots of wars. But he was speaking that word over Israel. He was warning them. And so this relates to Israel. Very important. As we study Scripture, as we study end-time events, as we recognize where we are, there are two things. One, I mentioned the faithfulness of God to Israel. But two, we have an event coming for the church too. The event that's coming for the church is the rapture. And that's where those who are believers, who are looking for his coming, who Jesus is their delight, and if someone is your delight, you're excited when they come to town. Those who are looking to Christ, God is going to take out of this world. I just put a teaching on Facebook you can read that's specifically about why the rapture will happen before the Antichrist is revealed. We have that assurance. So, study of prophecy. It's something that should stretch us out of our world. Our world is our daily life and our routine. thinking that tomorrow is just going to be like today, because today was like yesterday. That kind of thinking will keep you from seeing the big picture. That God has a plan bigger than you, and it's unfolding. And in my mind's eye, it's unfolding fast. There are things happening in the world that we couldn't say the things that I'm saying 200 years ago. Because these nations were obscure. These nations weren't in the position. This nation wasn't even on the chart. They weren't on the map. God is lining things up, and He's setting patterns in place. All the signs that are out there. How many, just in our local news, how many times have we seen parents killing children or children killing parents? These acts of unloving gestures against one another, beatings. And you step out to the global stage and you see riots, and just as was spoken in the scripture, kingdom against kingdom attacks. We've seen that over the last 2 years. These things are signs of when we are. Not where we are, but when we are in history. We are at a place in history that Jesus said, when you see these things happening, look up, because your redemption draws nigh. Now that's a statement going to Israel when they see certain things happening, that God's going to save them from an apocalyptic event. Climax, 2 more large events happening after that. Ezekiel 38 is coming, and Armageddon is coming. At that point, Israel looks up because their redemption draws nigh. There will be other things happening as well, but those are the 2 major prophecies following this one that I see coming in the future. These things shouldn't make us nervous. They shouldn't make you worried. And you can look at the world economy, you can look at America's economy and say, we've got some hard times coming. We've got some things unfolding that are kind of unnerving.
Sun, death, and glory.
But that's when you realize that God was faithful to Israel, and He's going to be faithful to you. God does miraculous things. And even when things get difficult and hard, you can trust in God. If you were to do a study of the 1967 war, where Israel is attacked, only 19 years old, by these neighboring nations, you would see that God saved them miraculously. One of the warriors in that period was their current prime minister. But there are stories out there of men out in the field of battle seeing angels, being saved from explosions. God's hand has been upon Israel throughout its rebirth, because God is leading them into a future restoration, just as He's leading each one of you into a restoration, a sanctification happening in your life. I find the period that we're living in extremely exciting. And it's easy to overlook. And that's the part that bothers me the most. I look at the church today, and most don't talk about